Welcome into the Trevor Staub Show, episode number 2. Today we've got a super great guest. We've got Steve Holloway, the marketing director for MVP. He does a lot more than just that, but we're going to hear the truth behind Gyro Plastic in this interview. We're finally going to get to the bottom of it. Does it go further? Is it superior? We're going to hear plenty of awesome stuff from Steve. Check it out.
All right, so we got a special guest here. So today, MVP has been a big subject. If you follow Foundation Media, we talk about him all the time, talk about him on the podcast. So I've got here the marketing manager and team director of MVP, Steve Holloway. Steve, thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Absolutely. So I really wanted to have somebody from MVP come on to the show because MVP, I've always been fascinated with MVP as a company. I think they make a really cool product. I think you guys just do an awesome job with disc golf. So, Steve, go ahead and, tell everybody, kind of what you do at MVP. I know you wear so many hats. You do logistics, marketing, media, all kinds of stuff. So just talk about like how you started out with MVP and kind of a lot of the things you do day to day.
Yeah, so MVP was one of those weird situations. I picked up my first MVP disc and I was like, oh, I think they're trying to do this. And I was one of those people who just kind of like got it and it made sense. And so I looked into them as a company because I liked what they had going on, and they at the time weren't doing really anything for marketing. So there was an event called Gyropalooza, which at the time it was like 12 people. I mean, it was a bunch of gyro dorks that just went to the headquarters, and hung out and threw Frisbees. And I went to one of them in 2016 and I said, you guys need a marketing manager and I can do it. They said, yeah, you're right. We definitely do. And then, from there they had nothing. I mean, there was, when I joined on, I think there was like 8 employees or 6 employees or something like that. I mean, it was still Brad and Chad doing most of it. They had some salespeople, fulfillment people, and then that was it. And like one graphics person kind of deal.
Sure.
And so I came on and started the marketing department. I basically was like, great, here's what we're going to do. There was kind of a team before me and there was like the inner workings of a team. And I showed up and I was like, honestly, team is like, that's a lot. I had previously managed a basketball organization. And so I was like, listen, I have experience doing this as well. Let me work out team details. And so we launched the team officially, like the first official team MVP members in 2017. Jennifer Sawyer has been with us, since that time. She's fantastic. She's also our ladies team captain. And so, yeah, it was just, there was kind of nothing for me to work with to a certain degree. There was kind of the foundation of some things there. And then I came on and turned it into, what it currently is now. And now there's like 15 employees in the marketing department, and MVP has gone from 20 people to 100. So there's been an incredible amount of growth, especially in the last 2 years, which is, relevant to all of disc golf. Sure. In terms of what I do, I manage all of our day-to-day operations for both all of our marketing projects, as well as our team projects, as well as a number of other operational duties kind of internally. Brad and Chad honestly have some hyper-focus areas for them that are the reason why we are as successful as we are. And so beyond that, I step in and help kind of facilitate in those areas where, they're not really focused at the moment. Chad's the genius that makes all of our stuff, and Brad's the genius that makes all of our stuff work. And I'm here to make sure that it looks good. And that's kind of the secret sauce that MVP has had over the last 5 years, and it's been working really well.
Right. Yeah. I love hearing about companies in disc golf, especially that are willing to see a need and hire from outside when they see somebody that has expertise. I think we need more of that in disc golf, seeing an open position and not just always hiring from within, but, looking elsewhere to people that have experience that they can take from the outside world and bring into disc golf, because that kind of knowledge is, what the sport really needs to keep growing overall. So that's really cool to hear. So MVP is like just a disc golf buzzword. When, I got into disc golf probably around 2013, 2014. So MVP was in its infancy back then. And when MVP first came about, it was, gyro was obviously, crazy groundbreaking. Like, what is this? And pretty early on, for whatever reason, MVP caught this stigma. where you're mentioning earlier about like the gyro nerds, like it somehow there was like it immediately had, you're either on one side of the table where you're like believed in the gyro, or everybody else who seemed to just kind of reject MVP completely. And they almost wrote them off just because there were some people who were almost so passionate about gyro technology. So talk a little bit about, A, how prevalent is that stigma, today versus when it, first came about? And B, what kind of led, do you think, as a marketer now who's kind of been in a little more recently, was it a failure from a marketing standpoint, or was it something that just kind of happened? What kind of created that stigma?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this coin, right? And it's an interesting conversation piece. And the biggest reason why is because nobody likes the answer. And this is, we want our really juicy talking points. So let's say you trained for 10 years to do a thing, right? Yeah. And then a company walks up and says, I make something that does that better. Some people don't like that, no matter what you tell them, no matter whether or not you prove it or not. Some people don't like those words, and they're scary words. And MVP has specifically stayed away from going and saying, listen, our Frisbees fly better than yours. Because nobody wants to hear that, even if it's true, even if I can prove it with science. We all know that it doesn't matter how much scientific proof there is in something, people will reject it, right? Today's day and age has proven that over and over again. Science doesn't matter. It's the court of public opinion. And, we have everything from, again, you talked about, it attracted a certain type of people. Interestingly enough, I can talk about that directly because MVP is made up of people who understand that as well. And part of that is because you had those people. So to give you an idea, Team MVP members are, good people first, good players second. But we also got that attraction to those people who get it. And so we have literal NASA scientists who play for us, Boeing engineers who play for us. I have talked with Yale professors who are like, your guys' science is amazing. And this is one of those times where it's difficult to look at somebody and say, we make a product that's better than yours. And that gets scary. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that we weren't saying that. Our fans and followers were. Our fans and followers were out there being like, listen, these MVP Frisbees are better. And they are, but if I say that, it's bad. If MVP goes out in the world and says, we know the science of how gyroscopic flight works. We know Bernoulli's precession. We know all of these things that make a thing fly through the air. We know those things, intrinsically know those things, because that's what MVP is built on. That's the science behind what we're doing. And so when you're that confident about a thing that is directly against someone else's opinion or directly against what they know to be true, it's difficult, right? Yeah. And so that's where that started, because fans of MVP were the people who got it. They were like, no, this Frisbee is better than this Frisbee, right? But they're Frisbees. And so some people just don't want to hear that. And so what you ended up with is the hardcore fans who adopt first. Those are the 6% of people who get it no matter what it is you're talking about. They understand. They're aware, these are like market trends that you can follow, right? 6% of the market is going to understand what you're doing the moment you say it, right? It's convincing that next 16% of the market that the thing that you're doing is a good idea before you have mass market adoption, right? Mm-hmm. And so that first 6% of our fans were like, no, you misunderstand. Like, these are good Frisbees. You should throw them. And that scares people. Back in the day, it used to be if you saw another person with MVP on the course, you were like, hey, and then you were instant friends, right?
Right.
Nowadays, most players have one in their bag, right? It was like you can go out to the course and almost every player has at least one of ours in their bag.
Yeah, no, that's, I think the stigma has slowly started to fade away with time. And, I think it's actually the other day I was kind of thinking about it because I was doing a lot of research. I was on MVP's website and just looking through and I was like, everything on here is scientifically correct. Like this stuff is black and white, the truth about aerodynamics. Yep. And it made me think about the golf industry, and the golf industry has become a data crazed industry. That is how they sell to the consumer is they're going to tell you each year how they've changed, how they've partnered with Boeing or whatever to change the aerodynamics of their new driver. And now it's going to hit. And even if it's small percentages, the consumer is like, this is just a little bit better than what I had. And that is the way that golf sells. And
that's a reaction to what's known as the zenith. once you reach the apex of a sport, right? How do you
Yeah.
improve, right?
Right.
Like right now, disc golf hasn't found that. Like, you know,
Mhm.
to people right now who think that like, you know, disc golf is getting to this, we're still on a very steep incline climb towards where the top end of disc golf is possible.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, and like MVP is developing technology that is different than what we're currently doing because we think that there is even more that we can do in this space with the science we have. And that comes back to, because of that growth projection, right? People aren't looking for 1% gains on things, right? And you also have a very healthy new market. You started playing in 2013, right?
Yeah.
So that means, I'm just going to guess. You tell me how close I am.
Okay.
Depending on how hardcore you went in 2013, right? So were you like casual or did you jump
I got into
all
the game very quick. I got in very quick.
So
deep.
by 2014, you were like throwing 125 feet like consistently, but then every once in a while you'd snap one and you were that 225, 250, maybe even a 300 footer, right?
Sure, yeah.
So what happens is that's how people think of the sport when it comes to their own progression, because there's a lot of these kind of plateaus and then leaps and then plateaus and then leaps. But what they don't realize is that all the top pros know that like once you get to that level, right? Once you're hitting that, like nowadays it's probably like 1025, 1030 mark. It's a climb, right? You're no longer leaps and bounds. You're no longer going to be, you know, 960 rated and then 980 rated. You're going to go, you know, 1035, 1039, right? 1040. Right. And it's that climb towards the top. And that's why golf is, listen, we changed the dimples 0.1 micron to the left. You're going to see 0.01% more improved accuracy with your flight. Everybody's going to buy that golf ball right now because improving by 0.01% is fantastic, right? Like,
yeah. And I think another big thing with golf too, and that's a phenomenal point about just the progression. And I think another thing with golf is the data is a lot more accessible to your casual player. You can go out to a club fitting and you can know what you're spinning your wedges at. Whereas disc golf right now, maybe if people were throwing and then looking at a launch monitor and seeing their data, then they would get a much clearer idea of, oh my goodness, this gyro technology is spinning at a faster rate. It is actually carrying further every time. Like, I think if we hop into that kind of era with disc golf and it's just going to be, you know, we're just waiting on stuff like that to be developed. That's when companies like MVP that are focusing on the, you know, innovating the disc itself instead of just kind of making new molds, you know, that's when they're going to take over, in my opinion.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Sarah Hokum wanted to do a series of events called like throw and go events when she first joined on, and we had like a plan for it. And it was a really great plan. The idea was, you know, speed gun, form check, release angles, and things like that. And they worked great when she was able to run them. Now, you know, pandemic times happened and stuff changed wildly, but like we were kind of building this program to really talk about that with people because it's true. I forget the YouTube channel, but there's a YouTube channel out there where the guy talks very specifically about a known measure of science that I don't know if he made this up or if it's one that he proved, but basically after so many feet per second, every mile per hour additional of throwing speed ends up being an additional number of feet, right? Okay. And it's a math coefficient. It's something like after the first 32 miles per hour, every additional mile per hour equals 7 feet of distance or something to that nature, right? I'm wildly misquoting, but you get the idea. Sure. And his math was interesting. And we spent a lot of time kind of thinking about it and looking into it and trying to find a provable metric that followed, you know, something along those lines. He had a great hypothesis. We couldn't disprove it. I couldn't prove it at the moment. But that is a thing that we do look at. Interestingly, anecdotally, we get that a lot from our pro players. Like a lot of our players go, listen, I know I'm not supposed to say that I throw further now, but I definitely feel like I'm getting more distance out of your stuff. And I straight up tell them, great, don't say that. And they look at me like, what? Why would you not want me to go out there and say that? And I'm like, because that is the kind of thing that actually like people get offended, right? Yeah. And this goes back to, how do I market my product that I know is superior without looking you in the face and being like, mine's better? People don't want to hear that. It's offensive to the market. They're not okay with it. And so in a weird way, we let that kind of proof in the pudding of, listen, every time, you know, one of our players joins us, without me prompting or saying anything, that's what they're talking about, right? And I say, listen, you can say that to your fans. you can say that to whatever you want. Under no circumstances am I telling you to say that ever. And definitely don't thank MVP for making discs that definitely throw further than, and then insert the name of their previous spot. Don't do that.
Oh yeah,
Correct.
right.
Don't do that.
In the era, like disc golf has always had that brand loyalty, like to the death mentality, where I can see where that's difficult. And the reason why I started getting stirred up about it, I tried MVP when I first got into the sport. At that point, I hadn't seen enough of disc golf really to notice anything anyways. I just, thought it was an awesome looking disc. I got it. And I'm like, this is a good product, and, moved on. Now that I've been in the retail space long enough and I've now seen it all, what I noticed that got everybody talking about MVP around here was this product that we're getting delivered. Like we're getting, big shipments from all these different companies, and MVP's product is, as good as the best of anybody's. It's a phenomenal product, and every time we get shipments in, they're consistently molded discs. We're never getting warped discs. The stamp designs are awesome. We have like the triple color foil stuff. Like nobody else is doing that. And we just kept saying like, man, this MVP product is so good. Like, is the Stigma still there? Like, why aren't people throwing this? And I do think that because we noticed that eventually, I think the general public is also headed in that direction. I think they're starting to realize, hey, you know what? Hey, we've got James Conrad now who throws this stuff. He threw Innova, like the bread and butter of disc golf, like meat and potatoes, if you will. And now he went over to the crazy science disc and he won a world title. So like that, I think that's huge. And I think people are slowly shifting. I think the marketing strategy, like you mentioned, of just kind of having to let it speak for itself over time. I think that's paying off. I think that was the right way to go about that. But, so talking about that, I guess, MVP is, the main market share of disc golf is still obviously dominated by companies like Innova. Discraft has slid their way in their trilogy. As far as MVP, getting themselves up on that pedestal with the big dogs, like completely taking over, what is there something specific do you think is kind of missing in that equation? Or is it we need to sign more players, or is it you think it's just a matter of time?
No, so the biggest thing to note is most of those companies have a 30-year head start on us.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
MVP celebrated its 10-year anniversary just recently. We are the youngest company to be up in this space. To include, there are companies that you would say are older than us that aren't even close, right, to where we're at.
Oh yeah.
And so the first thing there is like recognize that they've had a 30-year head start. The second part to that is MVP is product focused first. I'm not interested in just, who's the best player we can sign to the team so that they can go out and market our product. I like building relationships with people. I firmly believe that a good team and good product will sell itself regardless of what you say, right? But if the product isn't there, the team won't be there either. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the difference. MVP focuses almost all of its attention and effort on making the best Frisbees in the market, right? We make the best discs, and that's the goal, right? And as long as we continue the mission of focusing on our product, we will and have continued to prove that does shift the mindset, right? Mm-hmm. We're not just here to make discs. We're here to make really good discs. A really good example of our mentality towards that is Glow, right? So we had the Eclipse line of discs. And if you remember beforehand, it was the outer ring, right? The overmold was the Glow part. And they worked great because the purpose of designing it that way was actually so that most people used Glow tape or some kind of light, right? And so we were doing it on Proton, which is our clear plastic, with the Glow ring. So the idea was that like, yes, you had a Glow part, but it was also so that like your lights or tape would shine through. Yeah. And at one point we were like, listen, we really want to make better Glow. Because we get asked that question all the time, but now that we also have Streamline, we really think we should enhance our Glow since it's a fully, single bodied object. We don't get the option of having a Glow outside with a Proton core anymore. And the conversation went like this. Okay, great. Who has the best Glow in the market and can we do better? And that was it. That was the conversation. It wasn't what's good enough Glow. What's enough Glow for someone, to have in their space. We literally said, what's the most obnoxious amount of Glow? How absolutely bright can I make a Frisbee?
I got to say, MVP's Glow And for those of you listening who have never experienced it, it is a different level. Like when you think of globe plastic and disc golf in the past, even though for some reason it was originally, I'm sure, intended to glow in the dark, it really just became a plastic blend that, it just so happens to slightly glow if you take it into a dark space. MVP is like a flashlight. It's a flashlight. It
right.
is like,
what it became was you charged your disc before you threw.
Yeah.
You hoped it didn't go out before you were able to go find your disc. Like the other 3 people on your card would throw, and you're like, please just be glowing enough so that I can see you.
Exactly.
Our glow is obnoxious. We've had people say they get their disc in the mail and it's glowing through the packaging. Like they've taken it out of their, mailbox and you can just see it coming through. I've had people, one guy sent us a message. He said, listen, I love it, but can you tone it down? And the photo that he sent me was he was trying to stream with his office lights off. And the discs on his shelf next to him were so bright, it was messing with the chroma key. So half his face was getting chroma keyed out because they were just glowing. Yeah. I mean, just, silly things like that. And that's our mentality. That's our mentality towards everything, right?
I like that.
What's the best way we can do it?
Yeah. And I like hearing about the, company being product centered. We've been talking a lot lately about, the way companies are going about their marketing and how a lot of disc golf manufacturers are just going all in on players. You're seeing it. The salaries are just getting bigger. It seems like that is kind of like their step up. And what I see a lack of in disc golf is innovation in the disc. Like that is the equipment. That's how, other companies, especially if you look at golf, that's how they've always tried to sell. Sure, they have players, but they're trying to tell you what the new best thing about their product is. So I like hearing about that and that you guys are product centered. But it does make me want to ask about the James Conrad deal. I wanted to mention that. Sure. So James Conrad, obviously, to MVP was a pretty high caliber free agent. It seemed like a big deal, and this was kind of like, at least in everybody's perspective from outside of the MVP world, James Conrad to MVP was almost like a we've arrived statement from MVP. Like we're getting in the game now. Like we've had some players, like we've been here, done that, but like now we're gonna have a top player on our team. So when we saw that initially, we were like, oh wow, like is that how big of a financial commitment is that for MVP? Like is that going to be a gamble? Will it pay off? Because it's just so tricky to know. So what was kind of the thought process in going into that signing? The decision making. What was that like? Was it a no brainer? Did it take a lot of thought? And then did the company feel like in any way that was going to be a gamble? Not necessarily from James Conrad from a player standpoint, but from a selling standpoint.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
So it's interesting. So this goes back to, I come from a background of sports business management, right?
Okay.
Which is perfect, right? The brothers get to focus on making the best product in the world. I then get to turn around and, help make us look like the best company in the world. And so I'm going to touch ever so slightly on something you said a second ago, right? So MVP's product focused, but that doesn't mean that we don't want, the best team of players, right?
Yeah.
But this comes about in a different way. I looked at the market and said, who do I want to work with? Who do I think is a good representation of what MVP tries to be in a market space? And I knew I wanted the best putter thrower in the world. We make the best throwing putter in the world. Like, bar none, I'll say that without blinking. I'll look you in the face and tell you that all day. The Envy is the best throwing putter you've ever seen.
Incredible disc.
To the people who beg me for Envies all day long, small spoiler, I'm going to have soft neutron Envies available again very soon, so you better make sure you get those, because those have been the number one demand for the longest time. And if you've never thrown a soft neutron Envy, then you're missing out.
I have. They're insane.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So to go back to that, right? James Conrad, best putter thrower in the world.
Yeah.
I went up to him. He and I started talking years before he joined the team, because I went up to him and I was like, listen, I know you have no idea who I am, but I'm Steve. I'm the manager of Team MVP. I'm sure you probably have no idea who MVP is. But I want you to know that at some point, I want you to come play for my team, because I think you are the type of player that we want for our team. And James was like, cool. And then, walked away. And I did that, every time I saw him. Hey, what's up, James? You did great. We really like you. Let's talk. I don't remember what year it was specifically, but I basically walked up and said, okay, James, we're ready. I'd like to buy you out of your current contract with whoever your current manufacturer is. And he was like, whoa, what? And I was like, I'm dead serious. I want you to come play for us. And he just blinked and looked at me and he was like, you you would do that? And I was like, yeah, I'm dead serious about wanting you to play for us specifically. Not just any top-rated pro, specifically James Conrad. And he was like, wow, okay, well, I need to think about that because it was a little alarming. And he was like, we talked many times and he was like, I think I'm going to finish out my commitment. And I said, that's perfectly fine. And I understand, I'm not offended in any way. Like, you made commitments, you want to keep them, of course. And then, we talked and he was like, I'm shocked that MVP is looking for me specifically, right? He wasn't shopping around. He wasn't looking, we approached him and I'd been approaching him. And when we finally started talking, he was like, what would this look like really? I came back with a contract to him that he was just like, wow, this is what MVP wants to offer me. And I was like, yeah, it's not because we were willing to take financial risk. It's because I knew what would happen if we did it. MVP was in a position where we were ready to offer, what people would call a big time pro contract. But I also knew that our market conditions were ready. Like you said, our fans were ready to have somebody who they could kind of rally behind at every, DGPT level event. And I personally feel like we had those players for that. But I knew that, they wanted a who's on lead card, at every event or who has a shot at every event. And I did. I felt like James Conrad was that player and still is that player. And so, I approached him, made him a deal. He made an offer. We countered, we went back and forth. And then finally we're like, great, we're excited. And when he joined, I said, listen, I want you to understand something very clear. I'm not putting you on the team because you have to win. And he was like, what? And I was like, I don't expect you to win anything. I expect you to go out there and be an amazing representative for Team MVP. I want you to play with the confidence that if you don't win, we're not upset. Because that's not what I'm doing, right? And I've said this to all of my team members, but I wanted James to hear specifically that message to him. Because at his level, there is a certain amount of, I'm putting you on the team because I want you to win for me and do it with my plastic, right?
Right.
And I went to James and I was like, that's not what I'm doing. I want you to go out there and know that if you don't place, I'm still incredibly happy because I think that you are an excellent rep for the team. And he was like, okay, great. And I took all of that stress off of his shoulders because I don't think that, players right now, too many players are getting contracts that I am excited that they're getting. Like, I'm genuinely excited that contracts are getting to this place. I like signing big contracts. Like, I really do. I'm genuinely looking forward to, like, we had raises across the board for a number of team members. We had, players that are renegotiating with us, and I get kind of excited because they say, I'm going to want more this year, right? And I'm going to go, yeah. And, everybody, wait, what? Yes, correct. I'm excited that the sport is at a place where I can afford that, first off, right? Being a small guy, like what you're talking about, like, some things we've done have been, financial strains. But, like, I'm excited when I can say, yes, we can do that. But my fear is that the sport is going to grow so fast, so quickly, that there's going to be some, like, kind of long-standing damage to some of these contracts. Not because the players aren't worth it, but because it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress, right? Like, I genuinely hope, I do, that the sport can support this level of contract basis going forward with the drama and the atmosphere of the sport. I think enough people have joined that is true, right? I think enough fan base has finally gotten there that somebody getting a $4 million contract is great and will work out just fine. I hope it does. Like, I hope that the manufacturers see the value in that so that can continue, because then that means that the drama and entertainment value and product value of the sport is elevating to that place. I do think it's there. I hope it's staying there. Like, I hope it got there naturally rather than a bunch of people took risks kind of at the same time.
Right.
And it paid off. I just hope that it's getting there naturally. Again, like I said, it's a weird space where, like, I think it could be there. I just hope that it's not detrimental to the players in the sport right now.
Yeah.
Even though it feels good. I tend to be, like, a little more cautious with those kinds of things.
Yeah, I know. I like that. I like your, your approach to kind of signing James, and it was cool that you got the grassroots down with him so early and were able to complete that. Yeah, the market of disc golf is really tough right now just because of, like you mentioned, how quickly it's growing. Decisions made in the quick, big boosts of sales for everybody, all those decisions that are made during that time, it's very tough from an outside perspective to read, are these decisions being made because, all these new people in the sport are going to just like elevate it to a level that it's going to stay at, or is it just a bubble that's going to burst? It's just one of those things, like you mentioned, we're going to have to see how it plays out, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fear that every manufacturer has right now, right? It's called the rubber banding effect. A whole bunch of people joined the sport during the pandemic times, right? Just everybody was like, we can go to the park. You want to go play Frisbee golf, right? You want to go play disc golf? Everybody did that. And the giant question on everybody's head is, how many of these people are going to stick around?
Exactly.
Right? And if you'd asked everybody a year and a half ago, they'd have been like, I mean, at least a small portion of them. The reality is a lot of them stuck around because we all know how fun the sport is because we've been doing it, right?
Yeah.
But the fear is that we're being artificially inflated because of that. There's not really much else you can still do. I mean, things are starting to open up. Hopefully things are getting better, but there's no way to actually know that until it starts happening. Right now, I don't think it's a concern. I think the market is still healthy and growing. I think this summer is going to be one of those eye awakeners for a lot of people of where the market currently stands. To give you an idea, MVP went from 1 overmolding machine to now 17 overmolding machines.
Unbelievable.
Wow. And we are not keeping up with demand.
Wow.
I'm at like a, 8 to 12 week turnaround time on production. And like, so we did things like we, signed off on a new 80,000 square foot building that's basically double the size of the one we have. We went from 20 something employees to 100. I mean, it's craziness. Yeah. But we think that the sport has grown. We think that the sport can definitely maintain the current level that we're seeing now. It's just whether or not, you can expect to see additional growth beyond what's currently there, or the standard amount of growth that we would expect to see each year as the sport has been continuing to grow.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to hear about the growth. I mean, we've heard stories like that from other manufacturers, and it's, at the end of the day, it's good to see the money, going into the manufacturing side, at least, working on infrastructure for the company. So you mentioned Streamline earlier, and I actually thought this actually popped up a question in my head because, we talked about how, the gyro technology and how important it is to the identity of MVP. And we saw way back in the day, we saw MVP decide to kind of take a stance as a company where we're going to branch off and create Axiom. And from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Axiom was basically, we are making different colored discs, right? Like that was kind of like what changed with Axiom is they're like doing the multi-colors instead of just the black rims.
You're kind of close. You're so close. Just the little piece.
Give me the pitch here. Give me the.
Yeah. So the little piece, right, that changes that conversation slightly is that Axiom was designed as a way for us to test things that were outside of what the MVP brand was trying to do, right? So the MVP brand, it's interesting because you can see the proof in this. If you go to our website, some people wondered why we came out with 4 of each class of discs, and that was because they were designed in a range. You had the most overstable version, the less stable version, and then the patterns in between. And Axiom was designed to slot in between each of those spaces. So you ended up with 4 MVP discs and essentially 3 Axiom discs to kind of build off on this strength. And the idea there was that our engineer Chad got the freedom to kind of do whatever he wanted with Axiom. Whereas with MVP, this disc is designed for a specific slot. It's meant to fit a place in your bag. Axiom, it's like, okay, now go ham. Maybe make one like a less stable version and see how it works, right?
Sure.
And so that was the business decision behind it. Plus, I mean, like you said, we got to do something like colored rims. The MVP brand was specifically designed to be, it looks like this. When you see that black overmold in a bag, you know exactly what it is, right? When you see an Axiom disc in a bag, you have to like first check to see if it's got like a different, you may or may not know, but like you see a black overmold in a bag, you know exactly what it is before anything else. So there was some branding there.
Yeah. So with Streamline, whenever that came about, I kind of, immediately was like, oh, okay, so they've done this before. So I'm assuming, Streamline, I guess, was then, what made you decide to get away from gyro? Was it just kind of like, we want to make sure we're not handcuffing us from a sales standpoint? Because obviously, or was it just kind of an experimenting thing?
No, not even. Actually, it's way funnier than that. Our engineer, Chad, again, was like, how easy it is to make a solo mold disc, which is what we call Streamline, right? Single shot injection. So the process that we do is a 2 molded injection process. First, we have to make the center of the core part, and then we have to put the overmold on it.
Yeah.
That's twice as much work. We literally do twice as much work. It's 2 machines, twice the amount of handling, twice the amount of work to make an overmold disc, and we don't charge twice the price. Shock.
Yeah.
Chad comes back and goes, do you know how easy it is to make good solo mold discs? And I was like, no. And he goes, because they're so easy. Because he tested it and he was like, these come out and they're amazing. And we were like, well, then why won't we just make solo molds? Like, why are we not doing that? And they were like, well, I mean, you know, the tech, and Chad and Brad like talked about it. And we were like, listen, if we can make really good solo mold discs, there are people who are never going to throw gyro just because, being genuinely honest.
Yeah.
Like what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation. Some people aren't going to throw it because they'll say they don't like the way it feels. They'll say maybe they don't like the technology.
They'll think of something.
Yeah, and that's okay. There's honestly genuinely nothing wrong with that. That's, again, one of the reasons why we don't go out and say some of the things that we say, even though we know they're true. We don't say them because people won't believe them. So with Streamline, we were like, listen, we can make solo molds, and they're really good. And to prove that, we're going to make really good solo molds. One of the ways that I pitch Streamline at MVP Open, you could test me on this, by the way. If you see me at MVP Open or potentially now OTB Open, if you see me, come up and ask me about the trace, because I love doing this to people and they get really shocked.
Okay.
I say, here's the deal. Take it. Just have one. Don't pay for it. Have it. Go play with it. If you don't like it, then come back and bring it back. If you do like it, come back and buy it. I have only had one person in the hundreds of traces that I have given away not come back and buy it. I had one guy come back and be like, nah, it wasn't for me.
I have bagged a trace. Foundation actually ran a ton of them at one point. Phenomenal disc. So everybody listening, take them up on that. Go try out the trace.
I'm gonna have a whole bunch of people just trying to steal discs.
Yeah.
No, like seriously, at MVP Open, people thought I was crazy because I had a box of like, go ahead and try this one, right? I specifically was like, I'm taking these to let people try them. Because again, they look at the overmold and what it is we're doing and they go, maybe not. And I go, listen, we know a lot about making discs. We're very good at this. Take the trace, go throw it. If you don't like it, bring it back. Fine, right? If you do like it, come back and buy it. And then let me suggest something else to you, because I'm going to put a fission photon in your hands. I'm going to blow your mind.
Yeah, and it's a good way to get people the MVP plastic in their hands without the overmold, and then they fall, because Streamline, like the Streamline plastic, you know, obviously
exactly the same.
MVP, it's the same plastic, and
it's
a great plastic blend.
100%.
So when you get to feel it in a more traditional disc, then all of a sudden, it can definitely lead to people wanting to try MVP more.
Yep. It's our gateway.
Yeah, smart. It's smart. So what I'm going to do before we wrap up is we're trying to get people on the MVP train. We've been slowly doing it. Our MVP sales have gone up because we've just been telling people, listen, stuff is good. It's the real deal. You got to try it. So I'm going to go. I'm assuming I know that you know the MVP molds extremely well at this point.
Sure.
I'm sure you know them like the back of your hand. So I'm just going to throw out the generic molds. You've probably even done this before. I'm going to throw out the generic molds that everybody knows and loves, and just give us a comparison, something, if you love that disc, try this, just to help them when they're going on MVP tonight to go pick out their first MVP disc, because I know they're going to be doing it. So I'll start with like the easy one. What is the rock? What's the buzz? What's that like go-to, I've got 5 of them in my bag type of mid?
Sure. So I have 2 actually, and it helps. If you're playing pro level or above, right? If you're at that level, reactor. Okay. If you're still getting your way there, if you're an AM, if you're noodle arm like me, I've got old man game, the hex, right?
Oh yes, I have thrown the hex. Phenomenal.
So then you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
The reactor will absolutely handle a full power chuck from a pro player and do what you're trying to do with it. The hex is designed for those people that aren't trying to throw a mid-range 400 feet, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So reactor and then the hex. All right, so next we have the TBird. So like your slightly overstable fairway, another kind of super popular disc.
Yep. So again, 2 options going on here, right? If you are a professional player, you're going to want to throw the Volt or the upcoming disc, the Terra. Small plug for James.
Yeah.
If you are an AM player, or if you're looking for something that's more in the neutral range, you want to throw the Crave.
The Crave, okay.
Crave is a fantastic disc. It's, personal opinion, one of my favorite fairways of ours, but definitely a Crave. If you like to be able to work a fairway, meaning if you want it to be able to flex because you told it to, Crave.
Okay. Yeah, I have a Volt in my bag right now, actually, and I'm loving the Volt. So this is another big one, the destroyer. That's a big one for people is, what's that big distance driver going to be?
Yeah, so MVP does not have a true 12 speed right now. I can tell you that I have them in the works. There are options coming, but for people who say destroyer, I want to make sure that it's clear, right? Because I'm going to recommend a disc and some people are like, that's not a 12 speed. You're right. It goes easily just as far. The proof is in the pudding on the fact that you will find almost every one of our pro players throwing it, and that's the Photon. I'm specifically going to recommend fission plastic. And I say this because I tell anyone who's an AM, throw a fission Photon in 155 to 160 gram. Just trust me, it will be the furthest flying disc you will ever throw. It's insane. Because they're used to this idea that really lightweight means flippy, and that's not how fission plastic works. I can tell you, the biggest pros out there right now with the biggest arms take a 175 fission Photon, and it's not going to flip and burn. It doesn't. That's not how it works. But I'm going to say the Photon, because everything between that 150s range and all the way up to that 170s range, you're going to find a stability that matches perfectly for you, right? And I'm going to talk about this because, Elaine King throws fission Photons. James Conrad throws fission Photons. This game continues, right? I can talk about everybody's throwing fission Photons because fission is really, at its current state, fission plastic is kind of the pinnacle of what it is we're trying to achieve. We take even more weight out of the core than our regular plastics and put it into the overmold, so there's even more gyroscopic flight stability going on there. So absolutely fission Photon.
All right. So for last, we'll go with a putter. Now, obviously, MVP has a crazy variety of putters, and putters can be so subjective. But I'll just pick a putter that has been very popular lately, just to give people an idea, and that's the Luna. So, what if somebody is looking for something similar to a Luna? What are they picking up?
I would say something close is probably the Proxy. It's not, truly beef, but it's not flippy. It's fairly neutral, right? So I would say maybe the Proxy, maybe. That would be the closest thing. I would also say I'm, going to ping back to the fact that I have soft neutron coming. I'm about to have soft neutron proxies available. So I'm telling you, man, almost every player who's hardcore about MVP that knows, if you're in the know, soft neutron, NV soft neutron proxy, it's wonderful. Somewhere between there is your throwing putter. Now for putting, if you're asking me about your putting, your short game, right? I would tell people honestly to go try because we have a variable depth situation going on, and that's a big thing. I don't have big fingers, right? I don't have big hands. And so because of that, the Ion and I don't get along. But I know people swear by the Ion because it's the most comfortable disc they've ever putted with, right? So because putting is such a finger depth, finger feel thing, I'm telling you, man, you just got to go try, discs.
Yeah, I will say you can't really go wrong with the MVP putters. Everyone I've felt has been money, and they have a lot of different feels and flights going on there.
Oh yeah.
But all right, so you heard it here first. You've now got the cheat sheet. So if you're trying to get into MVP, there it is.
Oh yeah. The MVP Pro Shop does have a disc upgrader tool. So if you're I really like this, you can go and type that in. It'll tell you something that it recommends.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. Okay. That's even better. So yeah, go on, check MVP, read about the science on MVP, get in the know, so you can be like us, the MVP, what was it, the gyro nerds? Be a gyro. Yeah,
gyro
nerd.
nerds works.
Cool.
We call ourselves gyronauts jokingly.
The gyronauts. Yeah. It's cool to be MVP these days. You need to get with the times. But Steve, awesome talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate getting your insight. It was really cool hearing about MVP and also just hearing about your marketing perspective in disc golf. That was really refreshing to hear that. I love talking to people in the disc golf business. So thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep.
All right, and thanks again to Steve for joining us for the interview. It was awesome to hear that perspective on the disc golf market, about the signing of James Conrad, and about the truth behind gyro technology. He's got me convinced. I think I'm a believer in the gyro science at this point. I'm going to have to start putting more gyro plastic in my bag. But make sure to check out some MVP molds, spice it up a little bit. It's fun to throw. And also, make sure to tune in next Thursday. We'll be back with another great interview.